Hello, everyone. My name is Stacey Hodge, producer of Learning Experiences at the National Restaurant Association show, and I would like to thank you all for participating in this webinar titled How to Set Up Your Operations for Third-Party Delivery Success, sponsored by Uber Eats. Before we get started, I'd like to cover a few logistics for the webinar. We will take questions at the end of the presentation, and we'll pause at a couple of different points throughout the presentation. You may type in your questions at any time using the questions window in your GoToWebinar screen. We will do our best to answer as many questions as possible before we conclude. And if your question is not addressed, we'll follow up via email. You will receive a brief evaluation after the webinar. Please take a few minutes to provide your feedback and suggestions on topics you would like us to consider as we develop future programs. And I'd certainly like to thank Uber Eats for sponsoring this webinar. Their support of programs like these, providing valuable information and resources to the industry, is incredibly important. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce our presenter today. Christopher Ager is Head of Restaurant Operations for Uber Eats for US and Canada, where Uber partners with over 100,000 restaurants. He is focused on empowering restaurants to grow their businesses through off-premise sales, utilizing Uber's extensive logistics network and technology capabilities. Christopher started his career in restaurants at the age of 14, and he has worked with them in a number of capacities throughout his career, including back-of-house and front-of-house roles, concept development, finance, and B2B software. Christopher holds degrees from the Culinary Institute of America, Cornell School of Hotel Administration, and Harvard Business School. Please join me in welcoming Christopher.
Excellent. Thank you so much for the introduction. It's certainly amazing to be here. I'm just going to share my screen and sort of pop up the presentation I was going to show in the background, and we can actually use that as an opportunity to do just a quick introduction to me. So as mentioned, I lead up our restaurant operations team for our North America business. And to give context for everybody on the call, sort of what that means, I run a number of teams that sort of help bring together our product, our operations, and the rest of our teams to sort of deliver on building a really compelling platform for restaurants. So I don't run our sales team. We have separate customer success teams that do amazing work on a one-to-one level. I tend to focus on how do we actually set up a platform to make third-party delivery successful for restaurants, and how do we think around sort of evolving our model as we're seeing sort of the marketplace evolve. And then, as was mentioned in my background, I always think it's helpful to level set that I actually started my career in restaurants and worked in restaurants for many years. So I hope as we're going through this today, I'm going to try to bring the perspective of an operator in some of the things I would be thinking about for my own business, looking at basically the third-party delivery and off-premise space. So before we dive into the content, the three things that I wanted to talk about today with this group was one, give you a little bit of my perspective on the industry and where it's going. I get a lot of questions from restaurants on, how fast is delivery becoming a thing? What does that mean for my operations? And I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the market dynamics we're seeing, because I think it's a helpful piece of context setting to share. Second, I wanted to lead into, if you are thinking about partnering with a third-party delivery provider or already do, some of the things you should be thinking about within sort of the four walls of your restaurant that you can do to drive success. And then third, increasingly digital channels are a big opportunity for growth. And I wanted to talk about just a few interesting ideas to think about as you're running your business for actually driving growth through digital platforms. So to kick off just right off the bat, I wanted to spend just a little bit of time on what we're seeing in the off-premise market, as certainly over the last 3 years in that I've been in this business, things have changed quite a bit and are changing, I think, even faster today. So one of the things I think about a lot with our business is we are seeing a change in how consumers interact with food delivery. When we started the Uber Eats business, we were really excited about it because we had built a really dense network of drivers on the road every day and thought that we could actually transform that into a way to help get food to consumers in a fast and reliable manner. And one of the things that we're seeing is that it's not that the work that Uber Eats is doing or some of our competitors is just taking, let's say, pizza delivery, but consumers are viewing food delivery in a whole new light. And the analogy I like to give is like, if you can reliably know that you can get hot food delivered to you in 32 minutes without any variance to that, it actually transforms the way you think about plugging in food delivery into your life, because you are much more willing to like eat the type of food that you want to eat and fit it into like all the things you have to do in sort of the day-to-day. And with some of the change we've seen in how consumers are sort of reacting to food delivery, we've really scaled our business. So we started this business in Toronto like about 4 years ago. And since then, we've scaled to 500 cities across the globe. And there's interesting learnings, I think, from all of the different markets that we operate in. One of the biggest learnings for me personally is all the work that we've been doing to transform our business from a little startup within Uber to one that has built a large B2B business that is working to help make our restaurant partners successful. And I'll talk about some of the ways we're doing that later in this presentation. Now, our mission at Uber Eats is to make eating well effortless every day for everyone. And there's a lot that goes into that. But if you start breaking down that mission statement, a lot of the things that we think about are, how do you actually help consumers like live the life that they want to live and incorporate food delivery into that so that they're eating what they want to eat when they want to eat it. So many of the work streams and the things that our teams are heavily focused on are, how do we make food delivery more reliable so that every single time it gets to you on time, it gets to you hot and in great condition? How do we make it more affordable? So using sort of the strength of our network to actually make it really like something people can do every day and connect them to businesses around the world. And then 3, a big one is on selection, right? Consumers tend to care quite a bit about what they want to eat. So giving them options to eat from the places they love is incredibly important for us. Now, in what we're seeing in sort of the broader market, I think there's a few trends that are sort of driving how we're seeing consumers interact with food delivery. The first is, for the first time in history, in 2015, consumers spent more money at restaurants on prepared food than they did for grocery store food. And this has been a trend for a long time. If you think back to, let's say, like the 1960s, only about 1 out of any 10 meals that a consumer ate was prepared by someone outside of the family. And if you look at where we are today, it's about 4 meals prepared by someone outside of the family, and it can actually be quite a bit higher depending on where you live in the US. So we're seeing a massive shift towards prepared food, and much of this trend has helped the restaurant industry grow over the past 50 years. And what we're seeing is that trend is actually accelerating as consumers are really choosing to optimize for their own convenience and wanting to, buy food from people that are doing a great job of making that food. So we're seeing a huge shift from sort of like grocery food to prepared food, and that's a huge trend underlying all of this. The second is people come to me all the time and say like, oh, this is just millennials and young people that are lazy and want to order online. And we have seen a huge growth in how young people are using food delivery. But one of the interesting trends to me is that we're actually seeing this across the board, from everyone from our youngest consumers to people that are much older and are embracing sort of digital channels as a way to look at delivery. And what that creates, I actually think there's a bunch of different user segments that become really compelling potential users for your business. And when you put those two trends together, we're seeing a very fast rise in how consumers are using food delivery. This is just from one survey, and there's a huge number of them out there, predicting a 77% increase in the use of food delivery in the next 5 years. It could be more of this, it could be less, but I think the headline is this is a segment of the industry that's growing really, really quickly. And it's important to have a strategy in how you're thinking about sort of your digital and off-premise. And then the last point I'll say on this before digging into some examples is the industry is growing quite a bit. Delivery is actually shifting from offline to online. So less consumers are picking up the phone and calling, and and they prefer sort of the ease of ordering on a digital infrastructure. But I think what's even more important than that is whenever we survey consumers or restaurants across the industry, people say the majority of these orders are incremental sales. People aren't saying, instead of going out to a restaurant tonight, I'm gonna order food delivery. People are saying, instead of spending time cooking, I actually wanna enjoy that great food I love in a new place. And the interesting thing is we're seeing way more use cases for delivery than we used to. In fact, when we started this business, one thing I heard a lot was, delivery is just late night pizza and for people being lazy. And what we're seeing is there's a few use cases that consumers are really using delivery for that I think can really play in your benefit as a restaurant to actually drive incrementality to your business. So the first is, we've seen a pretty big shift in where people are getting food delivery. Effectively, people used to get delivery just to their home or maybe an office at late night. And one of the things we like to do at Uber is actually look at all the different places that people get food delivered to. And we see now parks and concert venues, breweries, fill in the blank, anywhere somebody has to be for their life, they're actually choosing to have food come to them to sort of meet them where they want to be, which I think is a really unique opportunity, both for different day parts and to sort of extend your consumer base. Second, a big use case we're seeing is we see big order spikes whenever there's a huge thing that people want to sit in front of their TV for. So whether that's the Oscars or Game of Thrones on Sunday night, when people want to gather at home and relax before a hard taxing weekend, they're actually choosing to use delivery so that they can actually simplify their life and bring sort of food into the home. We see a huge spike in delivery orders basically whenever the weather gets bad. Consumers are choosing, and this has been true for a long time, not to leave their home when it's pouring rain outside or it's freezing. And generally, a lot of the nights that you would have slow nights at a restaurant. And what's changing in consumer behavior is rather than saying, okay, I'm gonna stay at home and make myself a sad meal from the stuff that I've cobbled up in the fridge, they're actually turning to delivery to help them eat good food in a time when they actually don't wanna leave the house. And then I think finally, one of the things we hear most from our consumers is people are using delivery as a life hack. People are more and more busy with everything that they have going on and are using delivery to, order a meal right when they're coming home from the airport or right when they have to put the kids to bed at home. And one of the things I like giving the anecdote of is my sister-in-law has had 2 kids and food delivery has completely transformed how they think about eating because they want to spend as much time with the kids as possible. And more than make a meal and try to fit that into all the things they have to do at home, they've actually turned to delivery quite a bit to make their lives a lot easier. So in short, there's a lot of trends sort of driving increased usage of food delivery, and we're seeing a lot of things that we believe make it incremental. So from my perspective, I get really excited about the ability for food delivery to help grow a restaurant business. But there are key things that you need to think about as you're thinking about your operations and setting yourself up for success to make sure that if you are working with third-party delivery providers or frankly doing your own delivery, you're creating repeat customers that are loyal to your business.
And Christopher, we don't have any questions just yet. So if you want to continue, and just a reminder for everyone viewing, if you do have any questions, you can type those in your questions control window in your GoToWebinar pane whenever those come up. Perfect.
So I'm gonna jump into this section, which I think is really built for restaurant operators, anyone that owns a restaurant business. These are a lot of the things that my team spends time thinking about. And I give advice to a lot of the restaurant operators I talk to in some of the things that are most important to both stand out on food delivery platforms and to make sure that you're creating sort of loyal customers and creating a good consumer experience. So the first is high level, think about how to best represent your brand through food delivery. I think one of the things I get really excited about digital platforms is you actually have the opportunity to test things in a way that you can do probably faster than you can do in store. And when you're thinking about bringing your restaurant onto a delivery platform, you actually don't have to stick to just what you do with your in-store business. And some of our best operators are really thinking about sort of the offerings that they have on the Uber Eats platform and on other delivery platforms to think about what's going to actually create a really compelling food experience for their consumers. So some of the things that I think our best operators spend time thinking about are what items travel well. At Uber, we're incredibly proud that our end-to-end delivery times, I think, are best in the industry. And I think average time that food spends in transit is under 13 minutes. So it's not a lot of time, but certainly some items will travel better than others. And I think as a brand launching food delivery, what I would push you to do is actually like make food that you want to do delivery with, package it, and let it sit on the counter for 15 minutes and then eat it. And have a sense of like whether that packaging fits with that item, whether that's an item you actually want to offer on food delivery, and how it's going to end up to the end consumer. Second, there's a lot of opportunity to think about special items and combos on your digital platforms. One of the things we see is actually digital orders are a great way to increase basket size because many of sort of the consumers that are ordering food delivery are doing it as a group, either for their family or a group of friends together. So things like combos and add-ons are actually really compelling to people, and it's a great opportunity to actually drive up ticket size in a way that is potentially harder to do in store. And then third, think about the things that are easy to operationalize. As I mentioned, food delivery is largely incremental, though you'll see there's peaks to our business when people order frequently. And Sunday night at 7 p.m., there's going to be a higher volume of delivery orders. So think about things that you can do without disrupting your in-store operations. There's a lot you can do ahead, build in additional flows to your in-store operations so that it's easy and not taxing for your kitchen to sort of put out food and to put out orders quickly. And I think that's huge. And then what I would say is there's actually a lot of opportunity to test new sets of menu items on digital platforms as well. Some of the things we see, more of our high-end restaurants doing is thinking about how they can actually use, in some sets, a completely new menu to appeal to a delivery consumer base. We don't see massive amounts of people ordering $35 entrees on food delivery, for example. But if there's an opportunity to think about a subset of your menu that you can offer at a compelling price point for delivery consumers, we actually see people really gravitating towards that. So don't tie yourself to just what your in-store experience is as well. Think about how you can creatively expand your consumer base using your digital platform. Second, menus are phenomenally important. And if you think about what your menu is on a food delivery platform, it's effectively the main conduit between your consumer and your business. And I would just push everyone on this call to spend time on thinking about how their menu is set up and what they want to focus on. We spend a ton of time thinking about menus because it turns out that the best menus drive dramatically higher conversion. That is, eaters order from those restaurants more frequently. And they actually drive much lower defect rate. So good menus create much fewer downstream problems. And I'm going to talk through a few sort of best practice recommendations. There's a ton of stuff on menus. To just give an example, I think one of the things I like to say is, the best physical menu might not be the best digital menu. And if you think about your experience going to like a Thai restaurant in person, you may normally order, your curry with extra meat, not spicy at all, and tell people that you're allergic to peanuts. And it's probably true that none of those customizations exist on the physical menu. You're just saying your preferences face-to-face with wait staff or someone at the counter. And on a digital platform, you actually need to build all of that into your menu. So there's a few things you can do. One, think about your customizations. Customizations are a huge opportunity to do a couple of things. One is drive down defect rate. One of the things we see is if a consumer has to put free text in with their customization, defect rate is much higher. So consumers, things go wrong in the restaurant, somebody misses it in the kitchen, et cetera. And the wrong food ends up getting sent to the consumer, which obviously creates problems for them downstream and for our business, but importantly, actually affects eater loyalty to restaurants. So think about, for your items that do have customizations available, whether it's sizes or things you want to add to it, how you actually build it into your menu, which both will reduce defect rates and also becomes a really interesting way to drive, upsells, if you will, because consumers will definitely add on a soda or sides if you push that to them and make it available to them. Second, you have an ability to highlight sort of your signature and high margin items on food delivery in a way that is probably even hard to do with your in-store menu. Think about how you bucket items when you're building your menu so that you're actually floating signature items up to the top and the things that you want people to experience with your brand. It can be a huge opportunity to actually drive basket size, but then also like the right margin profile for those orders. Bundle and crate combos, I talked about that a little bit already, but combos tend to be extra compelling for delivery customers, and it's a great opportunity to sort of bundle things together to drive basket size. Drive beverages and sides, like you might have a side section on your menu, but also add those as modifiers to each one of your individual main course items, because consumers will click through and purchase those, and that's effectively incremental dollars for you. And then photos are super important. So we send out professional photographers to every new restaurant we bring on the Eats platform, but we're also making it possible for restaurants to upload existing photos they have. One of the things that we see is that menus with a lot of photo coverage convert better. So users prefer to order stuff with really nice photography, but they also more frequently order the items that have photography on them. So another great opportunity to highlight sort of your high margin items and those that actually can drive consumer loyalty. I could talk about menus all day, and there's a ton of stuff here, but my main push would be spend time here, because it feels like an easy thing to put a menu on a digital platform, but it's worth the investment of your time. All right, packaging. So this is something I like talking about. I mean, we spend a ton of time thinking about packaging and how we can actually make sure that all of our courier partners are delivering food the way it should be delivered to consumers. And we're spending a bunch of time thinking about, both on the courier side, how do we do that, but then also how do we provide packaging recommendations and a bunch of stuff there. This is more a push, I think, for all the operators in the room to think about the types of packaging that you package items in. It's certainly a decision that you need to make when you're sort of structuring your off-premise program, but because your consumer isn't eating, let's say, your food in your restaurant, your packaging is actually a great opportunity to create a branding opportunity for them and to create an experience for them. And I think some of our most successful restaurant partners have put a lot of thought in their packaging into how unwrapping an item can actually feel special for a food delivery consumer. So I think that's one. And then two, think about the items that are the packaging that food delivery items travel well in. This is another push to test, but try leaving it in a food delivery container for 15 minutes and make sure that the item travels well in that. There's an increasing amount of really interesting and affordable packaging, but it can be a really compelling value driver for your brand. And then finally, I would say in-store operations tend to matter quite a bit. If you think about sort of adding off-premise business to your existing restaurant, it can be somewhat disruptive. You're going to go to a place where you've got incremental orders coming in, particularly at busy times. You're going to have delivery drivers sort of coming into the store and picking up items, and a lot can go wrong in that process. So a few things to just think about when you're sort of setting up your in-store operations for success. So the first is just thinking about how you intake orders into your business. And we are increasingly investing in POS integration, a bunch of flexible options for people to receive orders. But you need to receive orders somehow. And it might be through a tablet, it might be through POS integration, it could be through a printer. Think quite a bit around how you actually create a good system to basically transmit that order to any in-store operating system that you have. And I think a key here is we see a common source of defects is when somebody's transferring an order from one system to another. So think about how you can actually streamline that process as much as possible, and put your order tablet or whatever mechanism you have in a place that's convenient for their staff, so that you don't have to be running all over the restaurant to sort of bring in orders. Second would be, think about your in-store flow to minimize wrong orders. We see a certain percentage of our consumers get completely wrong orders from the restaurant, and that can be as simple as a miscommunication when a courier comes in picking up food and getting the wrong bag. So I would think about how you can actually create sort of like a station where you do all of sort of your delivery packaging, and then clear ways to identify quickly for your staff to say, this bag is going to this courier, et cetera. And I think that is absolutely critical to minimizing that time. And then the last point I will make on this is think quite a bit around how you do your prep time. We have a bunch of algorithms on our side to try to figure out how long it will take you to prep food on a busy Saturday night versus a Tuesday, and for an order with 32 items in it versus a one order item. But we're obviously not going to get that perfect. Our goal is to ensure that our delivery drivers get there right when the food is ready, and both the driver isn't waiting, lingering around the restaurant, or the food isn't waiting, sort of just getting cold. And we spend a ton of product and operations resources on this, but the more you can think around optimizing your prep time so that you can deliver food in a consistent time frame, that helps us make sure that our drivers are there right at the exact moment they need to be. This is good for you and sort of your in-store flows, and this is also really good for consumers because we're really working to make sure that consumers can consistently get food in sort of like the time that we can quote up front. So that's a few things just to think about in-store, but if anyone has sort of questions, I'll give my email at the end, and I have a bunch of stuff here. So before I kick into unlocking new growth, I want to pause here just for a moment to see if there's any tactical questions on that stuff.
We do have a few technical questions I think we could address now, and then we'll get through as many questions at the end as you may be aware. We have quite a few questions coming in, which is great. A couple of questions specifically around some of the food safety initiatives and concerns that operators may have. Who takes on that food safety? Is it the restaurant or is it Uber, for instance, with temperature and the temperature control through the delivery process and the quality of the product once received? How is that best managed, and who would be quote unquote at fault?
Yeah, so like the way I think about a lot of these things, right, is like fundamentally we're sharing responsibility on a lot of these things because the workflow happens in multiple places. What I'll say is on the courier side, we have a ton of quality processes in place to make sure that like the food is going very quickly from the restaurant to the consumer, and I can talk about those in more detail. I think what's key is making sure that from a prep time perspective, you're like creating the food and then we're getting the delivery driver there right at that exact moment. As I mentioned, like our end-to-end delivery times I think are under 13 minutes. So we generally don't have a challenge there. The key is like making sure that the entire end-to-end flow gets as low as possible.
Great, thank you. And a couple of quick questions, hopefully. With regards to delivery bags, I know you mentioned working with the restaurants and encouraging them to come up with some creative packaging specifically for branding and whatnot, but are there any delivery bags that are provided by Uber Eats for drivers?
Yes, so this is somewhat different everywhere. So our drivers are independent contractors, so it's difficult to make sure that they're using bags every single time. We are increasingly providing bags for them to use. One of the things I will say is we actually did a bunch of research to show that in the delivery times, bags actually don't have a very big impact on temperature. And actually the most important thing is making sure food is packaged in a sealed bag. Bags become a lot more important in sort of the traditional pizza model delivery, where you're taking 6 orders at a time and delivery times might be 60 minutes end to end in the vehicle. But the answer is yes.
Okay, great. And then one final question before we move on, and we'll get through as many as we can before we conclude. With regards to tampering and even cleanliness of the delivery vehicle, we understand, it's third parties involved sometimes and whatnot, but are there any efforts to ensure there's no food tampering, or that, the cleanliness of the delivery vehicle doesn't affect things like temperature control?
Yeah, so the things I'll say is from a restaurant perspective, always make sure you seal your bag. That's super important. I think that's just a good best practice whenever you're handing it off to a third party. From an Uber and a food delivery perspective, we have an increasing number of sort of like quality programs that we do because we track every single piece of consumer feedback. And food tampering is actually a very, very small thing that we see, or like allegations of it. But we have a very sort of tight quality process around that from a courier perspective. The thing I'll say from a restaurant perspective, too, on the courier side is if you ever feel there's a courier you shouldn't hand your food over to, don't. You can rate them directly in our app, and we actually use that to drive sort of like a deactivation process for anyone that we don't think is fit to deliver food. So you can play a really heavy role in that, and we appreciate the feedback that we get from our restaurant partners.
Great, thank you. We'll hold all the other questions until the end, and we'll do our best to get through those. And as Christopher said, we'll follow up via email as well for those that we aren't able to finish. So Christopher, we'll turn it back over to you.
Cool. So I'll try to go to this section fairly quickly. I just have a few sort of ideas to think about as you're thinking about sort of just unlocking new growth for your business using digital platforms. So the first is use data to understand how you're doing and think about how you can actually use that to operationalize different things. So for each of the restaurants that partners with us, we provide something we call Restaurant Manager, which you can actually level up data on how different items have been selling, how sales have been trending, and then specifically like item level feedback that we get from consumers. And it's a great way to actually go in and see, are consumers having an individual problem with a set of items, either from like just a brand perspective, or they're things that may not travel as well for food delivery. So I would spend time with your data and actually iterate. In fact, many of sort of the examples I have from our partners, they're actually doing menu iteration based on this feedback and thinking about how they can actually refresh their menu to do things that will be compelling for sort of off-premise customers. So spend time there. We're actually releasing more and more functionality on this. So keep an eye out on sort of Restaurant Manager, but we're just thinking about how we can actually provide more data to our restaurant partners rather than less. Second, think about sort of off-premise channels as a marketing tool. So there's a lot of ways to do this, and frankly, having your business on a digital sort of ordering platform is a marketing tool in and of itself. We spend, a great deal of money on marketing and trying to create awareness of the brand and highlighting our best restaurants. But you actually can use things that are increasingly targeted to acquire consumers to your brand. So I put an example on Flow on the screen of something we call restaurant offers, which is an ability for you effectively to provide discounts to segments of consumers. So for example, you can actually provide a free item or discounted delivery to people that have never used your restaurant before. And it's a great opportunity to be increasingly targeted in who you want to attract to your business. And we're releasing more and more functionality here, but it's a great opportunity to think about those types of things. And then third, iterate with us and spend time innovating with our business. I wanted to pull out one example for one thing that we do across the US and Canada business, which is help our restaurant partners utilize their kitchen a little bit more. We spend quite a bit of time looking at our consumer data on things that they're searching for that don't convert, right? So if we see that we have consumers in the north part of Chicago that are searching for chicken wings and not finding anything compelling on the platform, we sort of know that there's a gap in that cuisine type. And one of the things we think we can help restaurants with is we'd actually identify the restaurants that are on the Eats platform in that area of the city and help them think about how they actually create new concepts within the four walls of their restaurant to solve for that consumer demand. So this is an example of a taco restaurant in Salt Lake City, where we recognized there just wasn't enough tacos that could be ordered by people. And we approached a restaurant that was actually a Latin American restaurant, but didn't have a large sort of taco section. And they created a brand new taco-only concept that doubled sort of their digital gross bookings. And I think this is a good example of sort of bringing together the data that we're able to collect and then the operational prowess that I think a lot of our restaurant partners have. Now, one of the key things I think about here is this is also a great opportunity for you to innovate on new concepts and new ideas for your brand. It's certainly expensive to open a new brick and mortar store, but to start a new menu and a new brand on a digital platform, you can actually do it at a fraction of the cost, get consumer feedback very quickly, and be able to like grow your business. And we have thousands of virtual restaurants that are now on the platform, and the mean virtual restaurant is helping grow bookings by like almost 60% on a per restaurant level. So it's a great opportunity to increase your restaurant volume as well. So with that, I will pull back. I think I'm on time, and we can use maybe the rest of the time for questions. We'll also send out this deck afterwards. I put my email on the screen, and if there are questions that you don't want to ask live, feel free to email me, and I will definitely get back to you.
Thank you, Christopher, so much. I think we all can safely say this was really valuable information as apparent by all the questions that we have coming in. So again, we'll dive in. We have 7 to 8 minutes, so we'll do the best we can. One question is, how have you, as Uber Eats, innovated to overcome pain points restaurants face when integrating with third-party apps?
Integrating with third-party apps, yeah. So there's a bunch of stuff here, and I'm gonna read into the questions. I don't have all the details, but one of the things I think people have pain points with are like, how do we actually get orders to restaurants? Like having a tablet in the store that is pinging and like bringing orders in is sometimes helpful, sometimes not. So we're actually investing quite a bit of product resourcing and just general business resourcing in a bunch of different ways that we can actually like build orders in. The most compelling is we're starting with doing a lot of work on POS integration. Both to some of the big providers that we actually have a standing POS integration with them, and then bespoke POS integrations that we can actually directly inject orders. So that's a big one. We've innovated quite a bit on our menu infrastructure because we've learned a bunch of things from our restaurants on what types of menus do you need to support to do things like, I want a combo where I can pick 2 things, or I have conditional pricing based on the size of my pizza, and we're spending time solving some of that. And then, I think a lot of sort of the pain points I hear are around how do we actually make the experience better for consumers? So there's a ton we're doing on sort of the consumer side to make the experience faster, more affordable. We recently released a product called Bandwagon, which allows you to basically jump on orders that were ordered near you for a discounted delivery fee. Helps us optimize our logistics network, but then we can actually pass that savings on to the consumer. So that was sort of a broad answer, but like there's a number of different areas that we're investing.
Sure. No, that's great. Thank you. A couple of related questions, but a bit different. Do you find that people tend to order from the same restaurants on Uber Eats, or do they try new restaurants each time? And somewhat related, are they ordering more so full meals or individual items?
Yeah, so I'll answer both of them separately. Obviously it's a platform and we have many restaurants on. We find that consumers like having a wide selection of restaurants. They order more frequently when there's a wide selection because, you probably don't want to eat tacos every day. That said, we find that consumers have favorites, and the vast majority of our consumers, once they find restaurants they really like, tend to be quite loyal to those restaurants and come back and order frequently from them, and actually order from a smaller subset of restaurants. That subset tends to be different for every individual year. So that's, I think, the answer to the first one. The second question was if they're ordering full meals or individual items. So we have sort of tried to optimize the business for whatever a consumer wants, right? We don't do a ton of small basket size fees or things like that, though we have some of it. What I would say is the average basket size on the Eats platform is dramatically higher than in-store basket sizes for basically every restaurant I've talked to. And a lot of the reason is you have sort of multiple people ordering on one order, and sometimes ordering for like big groups, whether that's coworkers or a group of friends gathered together to watch a game. But it's definitely more slated towards full meals.
Great, thank you. A couple of questions around the use of plastic, and so whether it's, from the packaging standpoint, how does Uber Eats maybe encourage restaurant operators to reduce the use of plastic with packaging, utensils, etc.?
Yeah, so a couple things. So one, I mean, we're noticing a whole number of municipalities putting in regulations on plastic use, and obviously we think about this quite a bit from both a packaging and just a quality of delivery perspective. So one of the things that we're doing is, particularly in those municipalities, leading with a way that consumers can opt in or out of receiving plastic utensils, as an example, which we hope to spread to the wider base of all of our restaurant partners soon, because that helps sort of consumers opt in or out. And then the second thing we're doing is actually working on packaging guidelines with individuals. One thing we're hoping to do later this year is open a packaging portal that we can actually sell packaging that we've used our scale to get discounts on, because we do think there's an opportunity for really best-in-class packaging that ideally is not plastic.
Great, thank you. A question around more so marketing and discoverability of restaurants. How does Uber Eats, using the app and so forth, help restaurants become more discoverable?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things, and I didn't talk about this before, but the way we optimize sort of the ranking in the Uber Eats app is unique to every individual consumer. So based on sort of your own search and order history as a consumer, we will rank restaurants that are probably most compelling for you. So for example, if you always order from taco restaurants, you will see more taco restaurants at the top of your feed than other ones. That said, you can always do search and search through both an item level or a category level to find those items. And one of the reasons we do that is we believe that we want to do our best to connect our consumers with the restaurants they're going to resonate the most with. So that's one way that we can actually get the right consumers connected to your brand. The second one is we are creating more and more products that allow restaurants to sort of sit in the driver's seat on making the decision on who they want to market to on the Eats platform. The offers product I walked through is a first iteration of that we have a large roadmap of things that we're investing in, because one of the things we want to do is allow you to market your restaurant to the consumers that you think are going to be the best fit for it, rather than the massive base that may not be looking for that type of cuisine.
Great, thank you. We have just a couple minutes left, so we'll try and answer a couple more questions. One question is more so around data, and so as a restaurant operator partnering with Uber Eats, do they get that data as part of that partnership, or do they have to pay extra for that data? With regards to the data, are they getting the good, the bad, and the ugly, so to speak, with reviews and whatnot as well?
Yeah, so the data that I mentioned when I talked about Restaurant Manager, and that's our first iteration. A future iteration is coming later this year, which will have even more data into it. That's included in sort of the partnership, and we're actually actively looking ways that we can actually share more operational data. It is the good, the bad, and the ugly, so you get a good sense of what went really well and what didn't go as well. And we're always sort of looking for ways to sort of share more data. We think it can be a really compelling way to sort of help iterate operations in a way that is really accretive to restaurants.
Okay, great. And we have time for one more question. And again, for those of you who've asked questions that we haven't gotten to, we promise we will follow up and get as much information from Christopher as we can. But with regards to bakeries and more of the dessert items, do you see operators from the bakery side, and even with regards to ice cream, that delivery is up for those types of items?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So it's hard to give a one-size-fits-all answer, because we have bakeries on the platform that are phenomenally successful and those that are less successful. from my perspective, and some of this is a bit anecdotal, I'll say a couple things are true. There's definitely a consumer market out there for bakery items and for like ice cream. The things that I think we see being compelling for people are when there's like a dessert restaurant, let's say, or bakery on the platform, like the hours need to be well suited to when people order food delivery. So today, most food delivery is lunch and dinner, and a smaller portion at late night and breakfast. So we're actually seeing an increasing amount of delivery orders shift towards breakfast. So that's good for bakeries. Some of our really high performing like ice cream, bakery, dessert restaurant partners tend to have actually pretty wide hours. Turns out people like to order ice cream at night. And if there's the availability to order it, we actually see people be pretty successful.
Great, thank you. And that brings us to the end of our time today, but we want to thank, again, Christopher, for you sharing your expertise and insights. This is an extremely hot topic across the industry right now and very timely. We also want to thank Uber Eats for sponsoring today's webinar. Again, this type of programming is really valuable to our audiences. And thank you to everyone who attended today. You will receive a copy of the PDF of these presentation slides as well as a recording. And please don't forget to provide your feedback in a brief survey that we'll be sending out momentarily. And thank you all again. Have a wonderful day.
Perfect. Thank you so much, everyone. Really appreciate you spending a little bit of time, and look forward to answering the questions that we couldn't get to live.
Great. Thanks again, Christopher. Take care, everyone.